Britney's come out swinging against her dad. Let's break it down. I'm Christopher Melcher. I'm a California attorney, and thank you for joining me. My passion is about making legal issues easy to understand and telling the story behind the story. Britney Spears, through her new attorney, Matthew Rosengart, has filed a petition to have Jodi Spears removed as conservator over her estate. This is an incredible first move by her new attorney. It's refreshing to see somebody actually fight for her. This should have been happening since day one. It's a long time waiting, but we finally got the action. And so I'm going to go through this document, talk about the legal strategy that's being used, some of the evidence that's being presented, the arguments that are being made, and what we might expect next. So I'll bring up the document on the screen. This was filed July 26 by Mr. Rosengart. And the title of the document, Conservatees Verified Petition to Get Rid of Jodi. Now, what I really like about this is that it's a verified petition. And what that means is it's actually signed by Britney. We'll see that in a moment. This is important. It's a big change on how things have happened in the past in this case, where people have spoken for her or allegedly on her behalf. And we never really knew, like, well, what exactly does Britney want? Because she's not saying it, not even signing some of these documents. Well, here, her new attorney has had her sign it. And that's important because this is her case, her life, and her attorney is giving her that respect. So we'll... right at the beginning, Mr. Rosengart lays out what he's doing and what he's not doing. What he's saying is this document is not the petition to terminate the conservatorship. That will come later. What he's trying to do right now is surgically remove Jodi Spears from it. And Mr. Rosengart's also telling the court, hey, I don't need to establish that Mr. Spears did anything wrong. He's definitely saying in here, Mr. Spears did do stuff wrong, but Mr. Rosengart is saying, I don't need to establish that right now. The court has discretion to remove a conservator, and the court should just exercise that discretion, get rid of Jodi because it's clearly in the best interest of Britney without making us show all of this bad conduct. But certainly Mr. Rosengart will go through some of the bad conduct and show what it is. He's also saying there may be a time when Jodi Spears is accountable for bad conduct in this conservatorship, and points in a footnote to conflicts of interest, conservatorship abuse, dissipation of her fortune, saying, according to a Forbes article, that her fortune is shockingly low. Now, many of the folks in the Free Britney movement have been talking about this for quite a long time. There's been accountings by Jodi Spears, even bragging about how much he's brought her estate up to. I think the last was $50 or $60 million. Well, the rest of us are saying, really? That's it? For somebody who makes this much money and has such a long career, you would think that they would have more money than that. And I also don't understand why the court wasn't saying, really, $50, $60 million, or some of the numbers were even lower early on. Why wasn't that investigated? Well, Mr. Rosengart is saying it's going to be investigated. This doesn't make sense. Now, he also anticipates that Jodi is going to oppose the petition to have him removed. And Mr. Rosengart is saying that would show Jodi's true priorities. Because if Jodi really loved his daughter and wanted to help her, wanted what was best for her, he would listen to her and leave. And he hasn't, and I really doubt that he will voluntarily. Now, this other part here talks about how some of the legal fees have been expended, and this bothered me from when I first time heard about it, and it still bothers me to this day. Mr. Rosengart's going to go through a little bit in the paperwork here about some of the bills that Jodi wants Britney's estate or Britney's money to pay for. And some of that is for the media tour, for having public relations experts, crisis management experts protect, advise, help shape Jodi's story adverse to Britney. And to me, that's shocking. And when the court heard about that allegation way back when, that alone should have let the red flag up, and the court should have said, we're not paying for this. And anyone that would bill for that and expect the conservatorship to pay for that, we're going to now call into question. And so what he's saying in here, and these are quotes, that wants Britney's estate, Britney's money to pay for public media and social media attention on network interviews, documentary films, the Free Britney. It's just really inappropriate to be asking for this type of compensation when it does no use at all to Britney, and it's actually adverse to her. And that there's $1.3 million in attorney's fees from October 2020 to June 30th, 2021, 8 months, $1.3 million. $541,000 of that is for media matters. And if you look at, there's billing statements from a crisis management person who's not even an attorney. And these are things that they're expecting Britney to pay for, which I see no reason for her to pay for. So good that this is being called out. The other thing that's being mentioned here in this paperwork is that Jamie has received a commission based on the income that Britney has received, 1.5% of gross revenues for performances. And there was a higher rate for the 2011 tour, I believe, and that this has brought in substantial amount of money. And what Mr. Rosengart is pointing out in here is that it may be appropriate, and certainly is appropriate, for management to get paid a percentage of an artist's performance. That's just the way that they work. But he's not in that role. He's a conservator. And many times, if a family member is serving as a conservator over an adult child, they may just do that out of love, and there may not be any compensation. There may not be a whole lot of money to do that. Here, he's not only getting basically a salary to do this job, but he's also been getting a percentage, and that seems inappropriate because, number one, doesn't seem qualified to be in that role. And number two, as Mr. Rosengart is alluding to here, that it creates a benefit or incentive for the conservatorship to continue. Now, in paragraph 7, Mr. Rosengart is saying that there's been co-conservators of the estate, meaning over finances, and mentioning Bessemer Trust. Now, the problem here, and I made a video about this last week, was that Bessemer Trust was apparently appointed, or at least the court said it was going to appoint Bessemer Trust, but then the court failed to follow through on that. And the court-appointed attorney, Sam Ingham, failed to follow through on that. And it's really shocking to me, makes no sense that Mr. Ingham, after fighting so hard against Jamie, to have a professional fiduciary, somebody who is honest, who can come in, who can help manage this thing other than Jamie, appointed, that Mr. Ingham wouldn't follow through and actually have the formal order or letters done. And so this languished for months, and it's really inexplicable why the court wasn't saying, hey, I appointed Bessemer Trust, or wanted at least Bessemer Trust to be serving alongside of Jamie. We thought that that was protective of Britney, and why isn't Bessemer Trust showing up? That just seemed to escape the court's notice. And then we all know that Bessemer Trust resigned and said, look, we don't want to serve in this role. And the court has recently signed an order finding that Bessemer Trust was never really appointed, and that it never accepted any of the assets of the estate, never acted as a co-conservator. So that is all true because the court just found it to be, but that should be investigated. Why did that happen? Why wasn't Bessemer Trust installed as the court intended for all this time to protect Britney? Now, The paperwork also talks about the physical altercation between Mr. Spears and his grandchild and destroying the relationship or whatever was left of the relationship between him and Britney. Now, in the July 14th statement that the court made to the court, Britney made a brilliant point. She said, "Judge, why do you have so much trouble understanding me when I'm telling you that my dad is abusive when another court's found that he was abusive towards my child, his grandchild?" And I thought that that was a great point. And why is the court not paying attention to this? The court has heard Britney speak twice, and at the end is saying, "Thank you, Miss Spears." What are you doing about this? Is this not being understood? The court on June 23 did have the power to act, even without request. The court can act on its own. The court could have acted on July 14th on its own. Anytime between them, before then, after then, the court can act on its own, because the court is not some passive bystander here just watching this. The only reason why there's a conservatorship over Britney is the court imposed it by an order. And the court can also remove it. And the court has an obligation, if it believes that the conservatee is being abused, taken advantage of, to do something about it and not just listen and say, "Thank you, Miss Spears," and move on to the next matter. So again, so many things frustrating about this case. But we're finally seeing them now come to light with an experienced lawyer who's fighting for her. Now, the other part of this is this drugging of Britney with lithium. So we're seeing here in the paperwork that a doctor put her on lithium and that this is a powerful drug. Britney mentioned that on June 23, and this was prescribed to her. And it's a little unclear to me from the court record whether her medical decision-making was taken from Britney or not. That's what Britney says, or at least her understanding of it. And now we're seeing some other statements being made that are unclear about that. But somehow she was prescribed this powerful drug, and she said she didn't want it. And that, again, is just cruel. She has made clear she does not want her dad in her life, but her dad, she says, has made it clear back to her that she has no right to say no, that she has no autonomy, and that if she is uncooperative with his wishes, that he will punish her by medicating her, by making her go into a mental health facility. And again, that is just absolutely cruel to do to another human being. And that's what she says is going on. And the court should be immediately doing something about it. And what do we see the court doing? We know that the court set this for September 29th, 2 months from now. Why should she have to wait 2 months for this? Why not set this for earlier hearing? Do you have something more important to do, court, in the next 2 months than to deal with this, to look into this? We're having an allegation under oath by Britney Spears and this big law firm saying that she is being medicated against her wishes by an abusive parent. Why aren't you acting? Why are you waiting 2 months to even consider this? I really don't have confidence that the court is looking at this in the urgency that it needs to. Now, I love here paragraph 34. Mr. Spears should be aware that any fees that he incurs in opposing this should not be paid from Britney's money. That's what he's saying there, and he's absolutely right about it. If Jamie wants to oppose it, that's for his own self-interest. It is completely contrary to what Britney wants and Britney's best interests. And if he wants to continue on in this role, he needs to pay his own attorney's fees to go forward. And that's a good warning. Now, here is the document Britney signed. And so she's verifying, like, hey, this is what I want. And she's also making clear at the end here that her nomination of somebody else to step into Jamie's shoes and at least temporarily take control of finances while the conservatorship is being ended is not an admission that the conservatorship is necessary, and it is not without taking away her ability to ask for it to be ended. So that was important that that statement was put in there. So now I want to go into the declaration of Jodi Montgomery. This is the conservator over the person, at least temporarily, and somebody who's independent of Jamie and are now clearly adverse to each other because they're making allegations against each other in court papers. But this is a significant declaration because Jodi is not just coming from her perspective on this. She's also talking about what the so-called care team or medical providers are saying about Jamie's role and why it needs to end. So I thought this was significant that she did this declaration, that she's saying that, first of all, the people who are put in charge temporarily of this conservatorship while it's being ended should not be family members. They should be neutral professionals, so meaning people who actually know what they're doing and don't have a vested interest in it, number one. Number two, that the medical team, so I'm assuming these are like doctors, say that Britney's well-being and mental health are being affected by this conservatorship, that her father needs to step down and his failure to do so is affecting her well-being. I mean, what parent would hear that and say, oh, well, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing? Not a very good parent. And that also, Jodi Montgomery said she has talked directly with Jamie about this. So he's been on notice. She's told him and said, hey, you need to step down. This is not healthy, and it's critical that you leave, and yet he won't leave. So that is, again, very, very concerning to me. Now, finally, we have the declaration of Britney's mom, Lynne Spears, and I know she's been criticized, like, where have you been all this time? And I know she's inserted herself in the case, and hey, better late than never. She's also done a declaration, and there's some good stuff in here where she's talking about the relationship here between Britney and Jamie and why Jamie needs to go. So she was talking about an incident that happened earlier on, some time of crisis between 2018 and 2019, and that had Britney being treated by a sports enhancement doctor, whatever that is. That doesn't sound good, but that was hired by Jamie to treat Britney and was the one prescribing what Lynne thought was inappropriate medication against her will. So that's also needs to be investigated. Who is this doctor? Who instructed the doctor? Did that doctor have authority from the patient, Britney, to do this? That needs to be looked into for sure. And that Lynne is saying she witnessed Britney being compelled by that doctor with the knowledge and encouragement of Jamie to enter a health facility that she didn't want to, threatened with punishment if she didn't do it. And that is so scary. It's one of my personal nightmares that somebody would just come and round me up and put me in a mental facility. I don't know why I think that, but that just literally scares me. And it's just terrifying that somebody could do this to another person, but that's what we're hearing. This is not just talk. It's not rumor. It's not a tweet. This is a declaration under oath filed in a case by Britney's mom. Now, she's also saying she's seen Mr. Spears exercise microscopic control over Britney. And that is contrary or inconsistent with what Jamie's now saying in his latest declaration, saying, oh, what, me? I didn't have anything to do with this. You go read that. He's saying, oh, it wasn't me. It was Jodi Montgomery. I'm not the conservator over the person. That's Jodi doing that, or her attorney doesn't know what he was doing. Well, Jodi's saying no, and Lynne is saying no. That Jamie controlled the purse strings, everything cost money, and everything therefore had to be approved by Jamie, and he was the one orchestrating all of this. So she's making that clear. And finally, talking about how Mr. Spears has used household staff, medical personnel, security detail to inform on Britney and report back to him. And that is a level of scrutiny that is terrifying, and it's like living in custody. And again, court, you have now received these documents. Please read them. Please do something about this. Don't just push this off into another hearing. Don't investigate. You need to act. The person is suffering under your order. You can change this. Don't wait so long. Don't be fooled again like has happened over and over again. I hope you're finding these videos useful. I'm happy to make more. I'm active on Twitter, and I'll put up my little Twitter handle here. So if you're not already following me on there, I'd appreciate that, and we can connect up on there and exchange ideas. And also, if you could subscribe to my little tiny YouTube channel, that would help out too. I appreciate it, and I will see you next time.